What happens when a judge tries to make an example out of a rising political icon, and the result backfires so spectacularly, it leaves the whole courtroom speechless? That's exactly what happened when Judge Thomas slapped Zohran Mamdani with a staggering $500 million fine. In an unprecedented move, the legal world, the political arena, and the public were left reeling. Commentators instantly called it the trial of the year. Supporters and critics alike rushed to social media, flooding timelines with hashtags, memes, and furious debates. But the real twist, it wasn't the size of the penalty that shocked everyone. It was Zohran Mamdani's response, a response so powerful, so unexpected, that it didn't just stun the courtroom. It brought Judge Thomas himself to tears. What was said in that courtroom? Why did this case spiral into a national moment? And how did a $500 million penalty turn into a viral story about courage, justice, and the unexpected power of standing your ground? Let's dive into the untold details behind the headline. It all started with a case that most people never expected to explode. Zohran Mamdani, a name synonymous with bold progressive politics and fearless advocacy, was facing allegations related to campaign finances, political activism, and supposed violations of new, controversial regulations. These weren't minor accusations. Critics claimed Zohran had crossed invisible lines in a system many see as rigged against outsiders. But her supporters argued it was nothing more than a political hit, job a powerful establishment fighting back against one of its loudest, the SRUPTORS. In the weeks leading up to the trial, news channels buzzed, legal experts were divided. Was this a straightforward legal case or an elaborate move to silence someone shaking up the status quo? At the center of it all was Judge Thomas, a figure known for strict, uncompromising rulings and little patience for political theater. He was respected, even feared, in the legal community. But this time, he wasn't just presiding over a case. He was at the center of a national spectacle. The stage was set for an explosive showdown. From day one, the atmosphere inside the courtroom was electric. Lines formed around the block, with journalists, activists, and curious citizens vying for a seat. Every word, every expression was reported live. On one side, the prosecution, armed with boxes of documents, evidence, and expert witnesses. They painted a picture of Zohran as a rule breaker, someone willing to bend or even break the system to win. On the other, Zohran Mamdani and her legal team, calm but fierce. They argued that the case wasn't about money or technicalities. It was about silencing a voice that had become too influential, too disruptive for the establishment to tolerate. Opening statements set the tone. The prosecution leaned into the narrative of law and order. They insisted that no one, not even a rising political star, was above the rules. Zohran's defense was more than legal arguments. It was a rallying cry. If we allow systems of power to use technicalities as weapons, none of us are safe. Today it's me. Tomorrow it could be anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. As witnesses took the stand, tension grew. Emails, campaign receipts, public statements, all scrutinized under the unforgiving light of legal cross-examination. Commentators outside analyzed every move, every line of questioning. Was Zohran's team on the defensive, or were they laying a trap for the prosecution? As the days passed, one thing became clear. This was more than a trial. It was a referendum on who gets to challenge power in America. Outside the courthouse, the story exploded. Cable news ran wall-to-wall coverage. Social media trended with hashtags like hashtag stand with COHRN and hashtag justice or just us. Celebrities and activists posted support videos, while critics doubled down, demanding accountability and equal application of the law. In late-night talk show monologues, the trial became a recurring punchline. Opinion columns split along familiar fault lines. Was the trial a necessary reckoning or an abuse of power designed to chill dissent? For days, the courthouse steps turned into a stage for rallies, debates, and impromptu speeches. Supporters of Zohran Mamdani showed up in droves, holding signs, chanting slogans and live streaming every moment. But behind the headlines, the stakes were deeply personal. For Zohran, this wasn't just about her own future. It was about the future of grassroots politics, about who gets to speak truth to power, and what the establishment will do to defend itself. And in the background, one question echoed. What would Judge Thomas do? Would he stick to precedent, or would he make an example out of Zohran to send a message to every would-be dissenter? After weeks of arguments, cross-examinations, and mounting pressure, the day finally arrived. Judge Thomas would deliver his verdict. The courtroom was silent. As Judge Thomas entered, cameras zoomed in, reporters live-tweeted every movement. The entire nation waited that Judge Thomas spoke slowly, weighing each word. He reviewed the facts, acknowledged the heated public debate, and made clear that the court would not be influenced by outside noise. But then he dropped the hammer. In the matter of the people versus Zohran Mamdani, this court finds the defendant, a pause, guilty of violating campaign finance regulations as charged. As a consequence, I am imposing a penalty of $500 million. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, and disbelief filled the air. It was a number no one saw coming. A fine so massive, it seemed designed not just to punish, but to destroy. Even seasoned legal observers were stunned. Never in recent memory had such a penalty been handed down for similar infractions. Commentators struggled to find precedent. The sum was more than a financial penalty. It was a message, but Judge Thomas wasn't finished. He looked directly at Zohran, his voice stern. This court recognizes the contributions of the defendant to public service, but no one is above the law. This fine serves as both punishment and warning. The integrity of our democracy depends on accountability. For a moment, it seemed the story was over. Zohran's political career, her financial future, even her ability to continue as an activist, everything was at stake. But as the courtroom started to process what had happened, Zohran Mamdani stood up, with every camera pointed her way and the eyes of the nation upon her. Zohran took a deep breath. Her legal team whispered urgently, but she shook her head. This was her moment. She stepped forward, her voice steady, and looked directly at Judge Thomas. Your Honor, I respect this court and the rule of law, but I cannot, in good conscience, accept a punishment designed not to correct, but to silence. The room stilled. Even Judge Thomas looked taken aback by the calm defiance in her tone. Zohran continued, this is not about campaign finance. This is about power, about sending a message to anyone who dares challenge entrenched interests. I stand here today for every activist, every outsider, every young person who's been told to wait their turn or lower their voice. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. You can take everything from me, my savings, my platform, my career, but you cannot take my conviction, my hope, or the movement that brought us here. Reporters in the gallery scribbled furiously. Social media feeds exploded. Zohran then did something no one expected. She began reciting the names of ordinary people she'd met during her campaign. The single mother who worked 2 jobs to put her kids through school. The immigrant who risked everything for a chance at a better life. The teenager who wrote her saying, you made me believe my voice mattered. For them, I will not back down. If this is the price of standing up for justice, so be it. Judge Thomas, who had a reputation for never showing emotion, stared at Zohran. For a moment, his eyes glistened. He reached for a glass of water, his hand trembling ever so slightly. The silence in the room was profound. No one moved. Finally, Zohran closed with a challenge. I asked this court and I asked this country to decide, do we want a democracy where only the wealthy and well-connected survive the system? Or do we want a democracy that listens to every voice, even when it's inconvenient? The power of her words washed over the courtroom. Supporters broke into applause, ignoring warnings for order. Even some legal analysts watching live admitted they'd never seen anything like it. And Judge Thomas, usually unflappable, looked away for a long moment, visibly moved. The scene became an instant viral sensation. Clips of Zohran's response flooded social media. Millions watched the footage, sharing it with captions like, "This is what courage looks like," and "Powerful beyond words." Mainstream news. Anchors replayed the speech, calling it the defining moment of the trial. In the days that followed, the story took on a life of its own. Petitions were launched, demanding the fine be overturned. Legal experts weighed in on whether the penalty was excessive and unconstitutional. Political leaders, some cautious, some openly supportive, joined the chorus calling for a review. Zohran herself didn't disappear. She appeared on podcasts and live streams not to complain, but to urge others to get involved in politics. She turned the trial into a rallying point for a new wave of activism, telling supporters, if they can come after me, they can come after anyone. But we're not backing down. The legal world faced tough questions. Was the fine really about justice or about sending a message? Did Judge Thomas overstep, or was he just enforcing the law? Even some of Judge Thomas's former colleagues began to distance themselves, calling for a more measured approach. And Judge Thomas himself, reports surfaced of private conversations where he admitted being deeply affected by Zohran's words. Some sources described him as visibly shaken, saying, "I never expected to be challenged, not just legally, but morally, for a judge." Known for being stone-faced, the admission sent shockwaves through the legal community. As pressure mounted, Judge Thomas found himself at the center of a new controversy, not about Zohran's actions, but about the court's own responsibility. Grew for an independent review. Legal associations filed amicus briefs, arguing that while campaign finance laws must be enforced, penalties must also be fair and proportional. National debate erupted on cable news, with split screens showing Zohran's speech side by side, with legal analysts dissecting every angle. Support for Zohran kept growing. Fundraisers launched across the country. Ordinary citizens, many of whom had never donated to a political cause before, contributed small amounts, sending messages like, "We believe in your fight and you're not alone." Other politicians, inspired by Zohran's defiance, began to speak more boldly on issues they'd previously avoided. Young activists posted videos saying, "If Zohran can stand up to a $500 million fine, what's stopping the rest of us?" But perhaps most surprising of all, Judge Thomas called an emergency press conference. Flanked by court officials, he read a prepared statement. "I have always believed in the impartial administration of justice, but justice is not only about the letter of the law, is about the spirit of fairness. After deep reflection and in light of new evidence and arguments, I am recommending a full review of this case. I also wish to acknowledge the courage and dignity shown by Ms. Mamdani. In the face of overwhelming adversity," he paused, his voice cracking for the first time in public. "Sometimes the law is clear. Other times it is our conscience that must guide us. I thank Ms. Mamdani for reminding us of the importance of both." The room fell silent. Reporters struggled to find words. For the first time, the judge had not only acknowledged his own limitations, but also the emotional impact of being confronted by a voice that refused to be silenced. The $500 million fine didn't disappear overnight. Legal appeals took months. and the case became a textbook example for law students across the country. But in the court of public opinion, the verdict was clear. Zohran Mamdani had won something bigger than money or political office. She became a symbol of defiance, of integrity, of the power of a single voice to shake the foundations of authority. Activists cited her speech in rallies across the nation. Law professors debated the ethics of punitive fines designed to intimidate rather than correct. Politicians recalibrated their own rhetoric, aware that the old rules no longer applied. And Zohran herself, she stayed the course, refusing to let the trial define her. She returned to her roots, organizing, listening, speaking out for those whose stories rarely make the news. Her social media grew not because of viral moments, but because people believed she was fighting for something bigger than herself. Years later, when the fine was finally reduced on appeal to a symbolic $1 acknowledging the technical violation, but rejecting the original penalty, the story made headlines once again. Judge Thomas, now retired, was asked to reflect on the case in a rare interview. He admitted, "I went into that courtroom ready to teach a lesson about the law, but it was I who was taught a lesson about courage and about the responsibility that comes with power." The story of Zohran Mamdani and Judge Thomas is more than courtroom drama. It's a reminder that power is never absolute, and that one voice, spoken with conviction, can change the course of history even in the face of overwhelming odds. For everyone watching, the lesson is clear. When confronted by systems designed to keep us silent, the bravest thing we can do is stand up, speak out, and refuse to be intimidated. And sometimes, just sometimes, that courage is enough to make even the most powerful realize they too are human. So next time you read a headline about someone being punished for speaking truth to power, remember this story. Remember that behind every viral moment, every trending hashtag, is a person who decided the risk was worth it. Because in the end, courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing the right thing, even when you're terrified. And when that happens, even the ones who wield the gavel might find themselves changed forever. This was the story of Judge Thomas, Zohran Mamdani, and the $500 million fine that became a national turning point. But most of all, it's a story about the power of one voice. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to share, and subscribe. For more incredible moments that define our times, hit that bell icon and join the conversation below. Your voice matters, just like Zohran's did.